Hello, loves. Let me tell you about my second worst experience with a customer. So, this customer needed a cake. It was just a small 6-inch white cake. Very simple, nothing to it. That was fine. Now, this was back when I started also. Back in my old house, I did not take deposits because I trusted people. Yeah, never do that. So, on top of this 6-inch white cake, she wanted a handmade pineapple, pretty big one. So, I was going to make it out of Rice Krispie treats. And then, cascading around the cake, she was going to have the display stand were 75 cupcakes with white cream. I was like, okay, the hardest part of this whole thing was going to be the pineapple. And then the most time consuming was the cupcakes. So, I handmade the pineapple. It was pretty much almost the size of a real pineapple. It took me about 5 hours, guys. I made it out of Rice Krispie treats. It was all edible. And I finished the cake and the cupcakes. The night before pickup, I messaged her and I said, "What time would you like to pick up the cake tomorrow?" She replies with, "Oh, I don't need it anymore." I was like, "What do you mean? It's all done. What do you mean you don't need it anymore?" She was like, "Yeah, I'm going to have to cancel." And that's when my blood started to boil because this took up so much of my time. I decided to give her a phone call. So I called her up. She actually answered. And I told her, "Are you joking? Because your cake is actually done. I just need to know what time you're picking up tomorrow." And she said, "No, I really don't need it anymore. I have to cancel." And I was like, "How could you cancel? Why wouldn't you tell me this prior? I pretty much worked on the cake throughout the week and you're canceling last minute." The reason I get so frustrated, guys, is this is when I first started. My son was still a baby. The only time I worked on cakes was at night. I couldn't work during the day because he needed my attention. So I really was running on very little fuel then. So when I was talking to her, she literally made it seem like it was no big deal that she canceled. Like, why am I so upset about it? Anyways, I raised my voice and I told her, "How could you do this to somebody? How could you just cancel last minute? Do you realize the time and effort that I put into this plus the money?" And then she went on to say, "Well, I don't have the money for it anymore." And I replied with, "How could you have the money in the beginning of the week, but not at the end?" And I understand, guys, I understand my mistake. I know things can happen in life and suddenly you don't have the money to begin with. But what I meant was, how could you plan a custom party and have the money initially and then just decide to cancel? I knew she was using it as an excuse. So finally, after I had kind of raised my voice at her, I wasn't yelling. Trust me, if I was yelling, you would know. She finally blurted out, "Well, you know what? I found somebody cheaper. That's why." And that made me even more upset. I told her, "If you found someone cheaper, why didn't you tell me in the beginning of the week so I wouldn't have to spend time on this cake?" Anyways, I ended up hanging up and I posted my cake for sale on Instagram. Thankfully, there was a restaurant that was opening up and they needed kind of a grand opening type of cake. So it kind of worked out well for them. Obviously, I lost money. I had to sell it for a lot cheaper. But for several weeks after that, I would get in my Instagram DMs, her family members coming. They would leave me rude and hateful comments. And then after that, they would say, "Oh, let me guess, you're going to yell at me now?" Or a couple would say, "Are you going to post this and blast me?" Which I really should have done. Obviously, they only heard one side of the story because how can someone be okay with canceling on another person last minute? Like, how can a human being think that's fine? Who cares if they spent all that time working on it? No big deal. Her time isn't valuable at all. After a while, the messages stopped coming in. I had blocked each and every single one of them. And I guarantee you, till this day, she probably still thinks she was in the right. The thing that upset me the most was she just felt like, "Oh, what's the big deal? Yeah, I'm canceling." So what if you already finished it? Live and learn.